What is up, guys? EJ here, aka Puckbond007, and welcome to the Movie Reviewers 100, this great collaboration channel on YouTube and Facebook that I'm proud to be a part of. So this week is Ron Howard week. Great director, of course, what he's mostly known for these days, but of course he grew up in Hollywood, was a child star, small-time actor for a while, and then became a great director, which he has been mostly known for the past 20 years or so. Made so many great films from the 80s through to today. Big fan of Willow from 1988. Cocoon, of course, from 85. Backdraft, Far and Away, Apollo 13, Ransom, Beautiful Mind. Not a huge fan of Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Ed TV, I like that movie. That's a good movie. The Missing, good western with Cate Blanchett and Tommy Lee Jones. Cinderella Man, really enjoyed that film. I think it's one of my favorite films of the past decade. Another one with Russell Crowe. Of course, he did the two movies based on the books by Robert Brown with Tom Hanks, the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, Frost Nixon, and he also directed most recently Rush from last year, a great film about the Formula One rivalry between James Hunt and Niki Lauda, one of my favorite films of last year. But the film I am going to talk about today is one of the classics from the 80s, which also stars Tom Hanks, and that's from 1984, and that is Splash, the 20th anniversary edition. Rewatched it last night. I hadn't seen this film in probably, my God, since the early 90s that I've actually sat down and watched it all the way through again. But it's a great film, great fish out of water comedy, literally, obviously, great romantic comedy, of course, starring Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah, the late great John Candy, and of course the awesome Eugene Levy. Yeah, just a really fun film. Tom Hanks, of course, plays this produce salesman manager working in New York. His older brother, played by John Candy, is a bit of a free spirit, sort of goes his own way, and Tom Hanks has just recently broken up with his longtime girlfriend, who we never meet. We don't see her in the movie, but he's running this produce market, basically, yeah, on the docks in New York City. Kind of down on the dumps. He thinks he won't find true love. But then, of course, he goes back to one of his childhood hangouts, and that is Cape Cod. The film actually starts out 20 years earlier in 1964 when he was a kid, when he was like 12 years old, and he's on vacation with his parents and his brother on a ferry. They're on a boat, and he falls into the water. He basically jumps in, and he has this vision of this young girl, this young mermaid, who sort of rescues him from drowning because he can't swim. And then, of course, people jump in and get him onto the boat, and he forgets about it. And then 20 years later, he ends up back at Cape Cod, and he falls in the water again, and he winds up on the beach, and that's where we meet Madison, of course, played by the lovely Daryl Hannah, who's great as the mermaid in this film. Basically topless through most of the first half. Of course, you have that great scene where she walks onto the where the Statue of Liberty is, where the tour guide is watching the Statue of Liberty, and she walks basically butt naked amongst them. And then, of course, the police like get her and put a "I Love New York" shirt on her and try to find out who she is. Of course, she doesn't speak any English. She has that weird name that she says in that weird mermaid voice, and nobody knows who she is. But then they find a like picture of Tom Hanks' character, his ID, and he figures out um, where she is, because they get separated and he all thinks it's a dream and everything. And then of course he finds her and takes her back to his place, and doesn't know that she's a mermaid yet, obviously, at this point, and tries to figure out who she is as they're falling in love and kissing and making love at the same time, after just knowing each other a couple days. Then of course Dallahannah starts wearing clothes and speaking English, obviously. She learns the language pretty fast, and then of course she gets into sort of all weird situations where she doesn't quite fit in. When they go to the restaurant and order lobster, she eats it just with the shell already like that. She just grabs it and starts chomping down on the lobster, to the sort of horror of the other restaurant guests. That's a fun scene. I'm a big fan of Eugene Levy's performance in this movie as well. He's really fun in this film. He's a scientist. He's a researcher. He believes that mermaids are real, and he's been working on this for a while. We first meet him. He's on the beach, like unloading some crates, and Tom Hanks runs into him. But then, of course, we find out that Eugene Levy believes in mermaids, and he's trying to prove that he's not crazy, because people think he's crazy. And so the whole movie he's running around trying to find her and him, and he wants to throw water on her, because that's what's going to turn her into a mermaid. That's what her fin is going to, because obviously we see the scene where she takes a bath in Tom Hanks' apartment, and she grabs a whole bunch of Morton sea salt, pours it in the bath so she can take a bath in seawater, and her fin appears in the water. And then of course Tom Hanks knocks on the door. Is like, "What are you doing?" It's like 2 in the morning when she takes this bath, and she's like freaking out because she doesn't want him to see her as a mermaid, obviously, and spoil the big secret. But then of course Eugene Levy gets in the way one night as they're coming out of this place, and he manages to get the water on her, and she turns into a mermaid in front of everybody, and Tom Hanks is completely shocked. Then the media goes crazy. They're like, "What's going on? There's a mermaid in New York," and then she's taken away by the feds, basically, and part of Eugene Levy's research team, the head of his research team, to do tests on her. I love, they also take Tom Hanks as well, and they stick him in this tank of water, and he's like completely naked, and he's just standing there like covering his junk. He's like, "I'm not a fish." I love that moment. That's probably my favorite line in the movie, "I'm not a fish." Of course they realize Tom Hanks is obviously not a mermaid. They let him go while they continue to keep her. And then of course Eugene Levy sort of comes to his senses, realizes what a horrible thing he's done to expose Madison, and he and Tom Hanks team up to free her, and then the rest of the movie, it's them sort of running away from being caught again. And yeah, it's not my favorite Tom Hanks comedy of the 80s, of course. Films like this and Money Pit and The Bachelor and I all sort of lump them together. My favorite, of course, is The Burbs and Big, from 89 and 88 respectively. I love those films. And this obviously isn't Ron Howard's best film either, but it was really his first big hit in the 80s, the early 80s. Before this he'd done Night Shift, I believe, in 82, and Grand Theft Auto in 1977. But yeah, he's a really good director, a great American director these days. Always teams up with Brian Grazer, of course, the producer, who I think co-wrote the screenplay of this film as well, or was based on a story by Brian Grazer or something like that. Yeah, produced by Brian Grazer. Anyway, great film. Great to see John Candy, of course. He's always fun. Eugene Levy, of course, most of us know him from American Pie fame as the father of Jason Biggs in that franchise, but he's really cool in this. Looks the same. Got that great curly hair and the bushy eyebrows. Tom Hanks good. Daryl Hannah really lovely as Mermaid and Madison. It's a fun film. Definitely not a great movie, but it's an '80s comedy classic, and has to be in anybody's Tom Hanks or Ron Howard collection. So that's my pick for this week, Ron Howard week. Make sure you check out the guys' videos this week. Thanks for watching as always, and until next time, I'll see ya.
Bond. James Bond.